Imagine this. You're just going about your day, and suddenly, two strangers break into your house. They're from the HOA, and they're here to inspect your property. But what they didn't know was that my home security was connected directly to Homeland Security. What happens next? Trust me, you won't believe it. Stay tuned. It was just another normal Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my home office, sipping coffee and preparing for the day. The air was crisp, and everything seemed peaceful in the small neighborhood where I had lived for years. But little did I know, things were about to take a drastic turn. I had lived in a cozy little suburban neighborhood for quite some time. Like any homeowner, I was aware of the Homeowners Association, HOA, rules, but I had never been one to get into any trouble. That all changed when I received a letter from the HOA stating that I had violated an obscure landscaping rule. The letter was a thinly veiled threat to remove my newly planted flower bed or face fines. I brushed it off at first, just another HOA nitpicking. But over the next few weeks, the pressure began to mount. I received more letters, each one more aggressive than the last. Finally, I was informed that the HOA had scheduled an inspection to ensure I was complying. What I didn't expect was how far they would go. The day of the supposed inspection arrived. I had decided to stay home and make sure they didn't overstep their boundaries. But when I looked out my window, I noticed something strange. A black SUV parked across the street with no obvious sign of any HOA branding. I thought it was odd, but figured maybe the HOA had hired some outside contractors. Suddenly, a loud knock at the door broke my thoughts. I opened it to find two HOA officers, dressed in what could only be described as casual business attire, standing at my doorstep. They smiled, but their demeanor was anything but friendly. "We're here to inspect your property," one of them said, flashing a clipboard. Before I could say a word, they pushed past me and walked straight into my home. I froze. No one had mentioned anything about entering the house. I felt a surge of anger rising within me. But I stayed calm, thinking this had to be a misunderstanding. I had a state-of-the-art home security system that I had installed just months before. It wasn't just any system. It was a fully integrated smart home network, and one of the most crucial aspects was that it was directly connected to Homeland Security in case of a breach. As the HOA officers walked through my living room, I felt my pulse quicken. Something didn't feel right. I quickly pulled out my phone and discreetly triggered the alarm. I'll admit at that moment, I wasn't sure what would happen next. But within seconds, I received an alert on my phone, confirming that Homeland Security had been notified. I felt a mix of relief and fear. Was I really going to let this escalate? Within minutes of triggering the alarm, I heard the unmistakable sound of sirens in the distance. My heart began to race. The HOA officers had no idea that my security system was more than just an ordinary alarm. It was a direct line to the authorities. The officers continued to inspect my home, oblivious to the fact that Homeland Security was on their way. They argued with me about my garden, pointing out trivial things like the angle of few leaves and the supposed excessive growth of my vines. Meanwhile, I was already picturing what was about to unfold. And then they heard it. The sirens getting closer. The officers froze. Their confident postures faltered as the reality of the situation hit them. They exchanged uneasy glances, but I didn't say a word. I simply watched, knowing that what was coming next was going to change everything. By the time Homeland Security arrived, the HOA officers were visibly shaken. They tried to explain themselves, but the security detail wasn't having any of it. The officers had broken into my house without permission, violated my rights as a homeowner. I later learned that it was illegal for HOA officers to enter a home without consent, especially when their inspection was limited to the exterior of the property. Homeland Security made sure they understood the seriousness of their actions, and they were escorted off the property. As the dust settled, I realized something profound. I had taken a stand for my rights, not just against the HOA, but against anyone who thought they could infringe upon them. The alarm system had been a small investment, but it had paid off in ways I never expected. But perhaps the most valuable lesson was this: never underestimate the power of a good security system, and never ignore the fine print when dealing with organizations like the HOA. Like the story